All right, so we're in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on page 171 in the chapter called The Master and Vijay Goswami. And he was talking about how the unreality of the ego, that it's like a stick on the water, that you divide the ocean in two as long as the stick is there, but when you remove the stick, you see the ocean as just one. And he said a ripe ego is like drawing a line in the ocean with your finger. So it's even less significant or less of a mark. And so we're trying to get our ego into that condition. The thing, it's not that holy people don't get angry, it's that holy people don't hold a grudge. So their anger is like a line on water, is what Ramakrishna says. It lasts, it's momentary. So they may get angry with you to help your karma or to whatever reason is behind it. But they don't hold it against you. They don't keep any memory of wrongs because they're close to love, to being love. So Vijay is asking the master, he says, "Sir, you ask us to renounce the wicked I." That's the unripe ego, the ego that's always looking out for number one. "Is there any harm in the servant I?" The I, that's the ego that says, "I'm the servant of God." The master, "The servant I, that is the feeling, I am the servant of God, I am the devotee of God, does not injure one. On the contrary, it helps one to realize God. So it's vidya, it's light, to identify with yourself as someone who loves God, someone who serves God. To build an identity around that, he says, doesn't injure you. Then it can actually help you. It can take you forward on your journey." And so quite often, because I like jnana, and for jnanis, it takes a very, what do you call it? It takes a very strict approach to these things because bhakti doesn't require as careful, a pristine watching of all of those things because of the nature of love, because of the nature of the relationship with the beloved. But in the path of jnana, you're not having that kind of relationship. And so it really is on you to do your practice perfectly and to maintain your ideals perfectly in that sense. And since we spend a lot of time talking about that, we sometimes get that impression. And that's my fault because we are bhaktas, and even our jnani is soaked in syrup a little bit. So we are always trying to remember and always making a very strong case for the presence of the beloved within and the relationship, the eternal relationship that we have with the divine. And so on the contrary, he says, it helps one to realize God. Vijay, "Well, sir, what becomes of lust and anger and other passions of one who keeps this servant I?" Master, "If a man truly feels like that, then he has only the semblance of lust, anger, and the like. If, after attaining God, he looks on himself as the servant or the devotee of God, then he cannot injure anyone. By touching the philosopher's stone, a sword is turned into gold. It keeps the appearance of a sword, but it cannot injure anyone because gold is such a soft metal. So it would bend if you got in a sword fight with it," is what he's saying here. So, so he's saying as we draw close to God, and this is why, well, we should not be in the habit of judging each other anyway, because appearances, we can only see the outside. We don't know what's inside. And certainly in the gospel, you can see the devotees making that mistake quite often, judging somebody, and Thakur then revealing the truth of the matter. In particular, I'm thinking, of course, always of Girish, that he would come drunk to see the master, and the master was never bothered by that. And when the devotees one time kind of ganged up and said, he comes here and abuses you, he's drunk, he shouldn't be here, why do you tolerate it? Why just throw him out? And Thakur got quite upset and chastised them, says, "You only see the surface. You know nothing." He says, "You do not see what I see." And that's how Girish was given the space to become a saint. and has become a saint for all of us who are following in his footsteps in trying to do the impossible, given our samskaras and our habits, to do the impossible, to realize someone and something as pure and as high and as wonderful as the divine. Uh, and so it's quite wonderful to see that if we hold this idea of being the servant and try and bring ourselves to our perfection by the inspiration of that relationship, mostly by using that unconditioned love, because there's something about love that isn't apparent to us without realization, and that is the power that it is. It's literally a power. It's literally like electricity, and that love is what gives. It's that ojas in you. It's that power, that life energy, that life power in you. That is love, and it runs your whole body and your whole life and your mind and all of that. It's that which manifests us. That's why we are Satchitananda. We are that love, and so it's through that we manifest, and through self-control. But the more self-controlled you are, and the more able you are to control your senses and your mind, and to know your separation from them, that inner energy doesn't then get expelled into selfishness, into lust, into anger, into jealousy, into greed, all of those things in the world. It begins to accumulate, and you'll feel that rise of energy. And it's something that can be hard for people to handle, because you feel super alive. And most of us are trained, and forgive my language on this, but most of us are trained to interpret that energy as a sexual energy. When it begins to accumulate in us, somebody will say, "Oh, I want to have sex," or I'm the slang, "I'm horny," which I hate to say. There's a Swami, it's gross, but that notion is there because we misinterpret that energy inside, because that's how we're accustomed to spending it. And that's kind of what keeps us trapped in the world, is that any time that energy begins to accumulate inside, we run out to our vices and it disperses. And we feel like we're ourselves again, because we're not accustomed to being alive, to having just that well, I don't want to say buzz, because that's not really like it is, but just this wonderful sense of life, of aliveness that comes through spiritual practice when you're battening up the hatches, so it can't sneak out on you. And it's where all of the divine gifts come from. All the gifts of the spirit come from. That's where that joy comes from. That's where that slowness to anger comes from. It's where confidence comes from. It's where it certainly feeds renunciation and dispassion and discernment, and that sense of freedom as you begin to rise above these things and see them from above rather than from in the midst of them. So, so he's saying there. So Vijay says, well, what becomes of these things, this lust and this anger and all of these things? And the master says, well, if the person's honest, if the person's making a sincere and earnest attempt, if they're not just doing it on the surface, but they're really internalizing the idea of being the servant of the beloved, or the devotee of the divine, then these things, they shallow. They're not deep. They don't leave a big mark for that person. So he says, if a man truly feels like that, then he has only the semblance of lust and anger and the like, just a slight look from the samskaras. He calls it in another place, the smell of garlic. Once you've crushed garlic in a cup, that cup's always going to smell like garlic. And there's not much to be done. And Girish heard him say that one time. And Girish said, well, what is someone like me to do? I obviously reek of garlic. Will I never be free from that? And Thakur then says, no, by the heated fire of your devotion, you can burn out that smell. You can undo your samskaras through devotion. And this is very, very important. It's something that Swami Prabhupada told me very early on. He says, the mediocre devotee will say, "Oh, I'll get there eventually. I'll realize God sometime. I might have one or two more lives." He said, and he was talking to me as a monk, so he said as a monk, but he means anybody who's being very diligent about their practice. He says, but as a monk, it's up to you to burn out these things through your fire of tapasya, through your devotion to God. And so that earnestness and that sincerity comes into play, and you can burn up your samskaras. You can lessen that smell of garlic within your spiritual pot, as it were. Over time, God removes that, and you can be free from it. If after attaining God, he looks on himself as the servant or the devotee of God, then he cannot injure anyone. By touching the philosopher's stone, a sword is turned into gold. It keeps the appearance of a sword, but it cannot injure. When the dry branch of a coconut palm drops to the ground, it leaves only a mark on the trunk, indicating that once there was a branch at that place. In like manner, he who has attained God keeps only an appearance of ego. There remains in him only a semblance of anger and lust. He becomes like a child. A child has no attachment to the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. He becomes as quickly detached from a thing as he becomes attached to it. You can cajole him out of a cloth worth 5 rupees with a doll worth an anna, which is significantly less than one rupee. It's so worthless that they don't even make them anymore in India. So for a doll worth 1 anna, though at first he may say with great determination, "No, I won't give it to you. My daddy bought it for me." Again, all persons are the same to a child. He has no feeling of high and low in regard to people. So he doesn't discriminate about caste. If his mother tells him that a particular man should be regarded as an elder brother, the child will eat from the same plate with him, though the man may belong to the low caste of a blacksmith. The child doesn't know hate or what is holy and what is unholy. Right? So it's that soaking everything in God. The more aware of God you become, the more steady you become in being aware of the presence at all times, the less important these injunctions become, the less your religion becomes about rules and regulations, about behaviors and the like. That love itself will inspire you to the right action and will put an aversion in you toward your vices, because you see what they do in their true sense. You see the grittiness of them. You understand the kind of the, dare I say, like almost the inhuman nature of them. How self-righteous anger is, and how harmful or greedy lust is. And they have their own distaste. And when you begin to do your practice, and that love and that energy begins to accumulate in you, you feel the distastefulness of the things that you've been drawn to through your ignorance. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you're not subject to them on occasion, that that you're perfect in every way, not at all. But your sense of I hate the word purity, but your sense of inner cleanliness, it's just as bad, but your sense of inner cleanliness becomes more and more subtle, right? It's one of the things I tell people, and this is one of those weird things I probably shouldn't say, but the thing that I found with joining the monastery is I kind of thought, well, after a few years, this is going to be really easy, because I'll get rid of this big stuff and then we'll be cruising, on to spiritual life. And what I found is that the intensity of spiritual life, that never happened, because at the beginning, you're kind of calloused about your inner world. You don't know a whole lot about your inner world because you spend most of your time in your senses in the outer world. And so you have to, when you make one of your big mistakes, you feel the guilt and you feel the sadness, and it hurts you, and that whole bummer of a situation, until you have your prayer and work through it and apologize and go through the whole, for me anyway, because I was born and raised a fundamentalist. So I carry all that nasty stuff in me, till the bitter end. And I found with great disappointment that as time goes on, even as those outer gross things fell off, that the inner stuff that I had not even been aware of would cause the same amount of pain in me, would cause the same amount of discomfort for me. And so I saw that this battle doesn't necessarily get easier. It gets more and more subtle. It gets more and more subtle until the end, when it just drops off like that. But the other thing that also becomes more and more pronounced is the sense of the presence, the sense of love. Your understanding of love goes much deeper. And, of course, as all of us are learning, as you learn to live according to love, your world changes. People are very different toward you. And it seems like the whole world is changing, but it's actually you changing, and you are the creator of your world. Even after attaining samadhi, some retain the servant ego or the devotee ego. The bhakta keeps his I consciousness. He says, "O God, thou art the master and I am thy servant. Thou art the Lord and I am thy devotee." He feels that way even after the realization of God. His I is not completely effaced. Again, by constantly practicing this kind of I consciousness, one ultimately attains God. This is called bhakti yoga, right? This is called the love of God. Those people who aren't interested in becoming sugar, they want to taste sugar. They love the companionship of the divine, of the beloved, and they come back with the beloved whenever he incarnates. Thakur said that some of his disciples were disciples of Jesus at that time, and some of his disciples were with the Buddha, and some of his disciples were with Krishna. And so these non-avatars, but these spiritual beings who have been chosen by the divine, return with him again and again out of their own devotion for God, their love of being in the play with the divine, and their love for us, their compassion for us, the unrealized, who are still having to muddle through all of this suffering and troubles that we bring on ourselves. One can attain the knowledge of Brahman too by following the path of bhakti. God is all-powerful. He may give his devotee Brahmagyana also, if he so wills, but the devotee generally doesn't seek the knowledge of the absolute. He would rather have the consciousness that God is the master and he is the servant, or that God is the divine mother and he is the child. This is, you can see the compassion in God, that we get to choose the role and the type of relationship. And he or she or that is delighted to fulfill that, to be that. And so I've always thought, in a lot of these near-death experiences that I hear from Swami Mahayogananda and Greg was also very much into them, that a lot of times on the other side, people see their loved ones, like someone saw Jesus, someone saw their grandfather, someone, it was their mother. And I was very curious about that and kind of thought about it. And the kind of conclusion that I've come from is that God appears to you as your own highest ideal of love. So if your granny was your highest ideal of love, God will become that for you when he welcomes you. God will reach you and show you the amount of love that you're able to comprehend by using your highest ideal in order to express it to you. And so here he's saying that God is doing that, but that God can also give you Brahmagyani, that this, he's talking about it in that way because there's some sort of idea, a popular idea, that bhakti yoga is kind of, that's sentimental. It's not really a great path. It's for the weak or whatnot. And the Gyani, that's the path, that's the cool way to know God. That's the truth. And there's no pretending there. And so he's saying this to kind of counter that, saying, no, God is all powerful. And through a relationship with him, you can have what anybody else can have who goes through that path doing it on their own, that you can have it just through love with the divine. God will give it to you if that's what you want. But most of us as bhaktis, we're perfectly happy about thinking about sitting under a cherry tree with Krishna by the stream for the rest of our eternity. That's kind of a cool idea. It's like, yeah, let's do that. Or a cafe in heaven with God or something, however you view it. I always have this idea when I die of waltzing. For much of my life, I've seen these beautiful pictures of all of these amazing things that are out there in space that no one has seen. We've only got pictures of them from these telescopes. And I have this kind of little fantasy, that when I die, that me and the beloved are going to waltz through just to pass through the universe as we leave it, to go and let him show me all of this beautiful art that he's been working on for billions of years and that nobody has ever seen, nobody has ever been able to appreciate. And just that idea of maybe I can appreciate it. Maybe I can come and tell you how beautiful. Master. Yes, one may reach him by following the path of discrimination too. That is called Jnana Yoga, but it is an extremely difficult path. I have told you already of the 7 planes of consciousness. On reaching the 7th plane, the mind goes into samadhi. If a man acquires the firm knowledge that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory, then his mind merges into samadhi. But in the Kali Yuga, the life of a man depends entirely on food. How can he have the consciousness that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory? In the Kali Yuga, it is difficult to have the feeling, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the 24 cosmic principles, I am beyond pleasure and pain, I am above disease and grief, old age and death. However you may reason, however you may argue, the feeling that the body is identical with the soul will somehow crop up from an unexpected quarter. You may cut a peepal tree to the ground and think that it is dead to its very root, but the next morning you will find a new sprout shooting up from the dead stump. One cannot get rid of this identification with the body. Therefore, the path of bhakti is the best for the people of the Kali Yuga. It is an easy path, right? So in this age, when things have gotten to be like they are, which all of us can attest to, that there's no support for someone who doesn't think they're the body. There's no support for someone who doesn't think that they're the mind, that they don't grow old, or that all the passions and needs of the body are not theirs. The world does everything, every billboard, every advertisement, every magazine, every song, every book, every movie, every person that you meet is going to talk to you as a body and a mind, and are going to treat you like a body and a mind. And so how in the world, in that kind of environment, is it going to be possible? And he doesn't say it's not possible. He just says it's very difficult. And so there are those people who are just Gyanis. They just want to be Gyanis. They don't want to do the bhakti thing. They don't trust it, or don't want it, or don't like it, or whatever. And there's always a set of mountains somewhere for those people where they can go and do that Jnanic practice and become an inspiration through it for all of us. And I don't want to become sugar. I want to eat it. I never feel like saying, I am Brahman. I say, you are my Lord, and I am your servant. It is better to make the mind go up and down between the 5th and 6th planes, like a boat racing between 2 points. I don't want to go beyond the 6th plane and keep my mind a long time in the 7th. My desire is to sing the name and the glories of God. It is very good to look on God as the master and oneself as his servant. Further, you see, people speak of the waves as belonging to the Ganges, but no one says that the Ganges belongs to the waves. The feeling I am he is not wholesome, right? That practice of I am God or I am that is not appropriate to somebody who has even the slightest idea that they're the body or that they're the mind. Why is that? Because that slight thinking that you're the body creates the ego. That's where the ego manifests. And the ego will take responsibility. And since you don't know who the I is without an ego, your ego will take that identity. And if you start feeding it stuff like I am that, the danger is of becoming a sensualist, because you lose your fear of wrong, of wrong thinking, and you justify what you do by using this identity. Oh, I'm God. I don't have to worry about these things, and you lose your way entirely, because basically what you've done is fattened up your ego, so much so that it can't see the path anymore. So for us as bhaktas, our highest ideal is a unifying hug from the Divine Mother or the Divine Beloved, that we don't want to merge. We don't want to become that. We want to enjoy that through singing, and dancing, and playing, and talking, and laying together in the meadow in the sun and laughing about all of this stuff together.
So excuse me, Swamiji.
Yes.
So when you are seeing me, or when we are supposed to see each other, then if we want to get away from seeing the other person as a body, then what do we tell ourselves?
Well, it's not a matter of whether you see another person as a body or not. It's how you see yourself, because how you see yourself will be how you see others. Because you can't know anything about anybody else. All that we do is know what's about ourselves, and we project that on everybody else. So that if I look at you like that, you think, oh, well, when I go like that, that means I'm disgusted by somebody. And so you're looking at me and I'm going like that, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, he's disgusted by me. But I could have an itch in my right nostril. You have no idea, but you've interpreted it as being disgusted with you. And so you react that way and go on with it. And I just roll my eyes and walk away and go like, well, I don't know what was up with that one. So that's our trouble. You see, we'll see in others what we see in ourselves. That's why our practice is going inward. What you see in others is not the practice. What you see in yourself is the practice. And even with that, what I would say to you is, if you are wanting to practice, say in case if somebody was having troubles with lust, or if somebody was having troubles with anger, or somebody was having troubles with Democrats or Republicans or whatever this world is doing to us right now, when we look at somebody, we don't look at the whole. Look at the eyes. Look at the eyes and ask yourself, who is in there looking at me? Because it's the same person in you looking at them. It's the divine, it's the beloved. And so consciously, you may not see it that way, you may not know it to be that way, but you practice. And so you look in that person's eyes carefully, and with the idea, I see you, Thakur, I see you in there looking at me. And then you talk to that. Don't talk to the person, talk to that in their eyes. I had that experience with Pravrajika Moksha Prana the first time in my life that I heard or felt somebody talk to the me that I wasn't even aware of, but the me that was so intimate, because when she looked at me, I had this sense that I was naked, because her eyes just went right past my presentation. It went right past my personality, went right past it, and looked at me, the naked little boy me that's somewhere in there. And she saw that. And so I think it's a good practice in conjunction with seeing your own divinity within. That's the main thing. But when you're dealing with the world, instead of getting caught up with all of the physical stuff, focus on someone's eyes and look at their eyes with the knowledge that whatever is looking out of their eyes and seeing you is God, is your own beloved. And then talk to them in that spirit and actually turn that conversation into prayer. It becomes an encounter between you and God. And the beautiful thing about that is people respond to it. God does talk back to you through that person, because their love is activated. They feel that sincerity. They feel that warmth. They feel that gentleness from you, and they will react to it. And when they react from that place of love that you're reminding them of, that is God, that is the divine. So as a practice, that is fine.
Very nice.
You know,
Thank you so much.
sure, sure. A man who entertains such an idea of I am he, while looking on his body as the self, causes himself great harm. He cannot go forward in spiritual life. So this idea that, you know, if you're not, and this happens a lot, especially with, I feel funny. Well, especially as Americans, because we just don't have any exposure to real sadhus, you know, to real seers. It's very rare for us to encounter one, and so we don't have any idea really of what that really means. And so I've met many folks, you know, that do this practice. Oh, I am that, and it has turned them into a sensualist, you know, and the ego sits very firmly ensconced there. And it's quite disturbing. And the reason it's disturbing is because you can't go forward. Excuse me, you can't go forward. You know, you have to. You can only stay in that place until you work that out. Until that circle has run its course, and you're willing to give up that sense of I that you've mistaken its identity with. He deceives himself as well as others. He cannot understand his own state of mind. You know, I remember this. We had, I used to work and go to school at a holistic health school up in Humboldt County, up in the Heartwood Institute, way back in 1997, maybe. And we had a guy come as a visitor, and he was dressed as a sadhu, dressed as a swami. He was a Western guy. He didn't have a guru. And he just sort of wandered around, you know, going from ashram to ashram in this Garwa and in the state. And while he was there, he was always trying to give people, you know, that Shaktipat look, that eye of power, you know, to like look through them, and was just posing the whole time, you know, making sure that everyone knew that he was the Swami and that he had these accomplishments and that whatnot, this, that, and the other. And that's what Thakur's talking about. You know, we get stuck in a wrong idea of ourself, and we deceive our own self about our nature and about our struggles and where we're really at. And so it's very important, you know, for us as bhaktas, it's the safe path. We don't say, I am he. We say, God, I love you. Yeah, man, you're awesome. I'll do anything, whatever you need. Just let me know. I'm yours. and that way is opens the door. that way we get home very quickly. But it isn't any and every kind of bhakti that enables one to realize God. One cannot realize God without prema bhakti, this supreme love. Another name for prema bhakti is raga bhakti, supreme love, which means being attached only to God. That God is the only thing you're interested in. You know, for all of your moods, all of your hungers, all of your desires, you just go after God. Nothing else. Nothing is even close. That's raga or prema bhakti, supreme love. It's love. God cannot be realized without love and longing. Unless one has learned to love God, one cannot realize Him. Right. So it's this prema bhakti. Another description of it is this: it's a pure love, which means it requires nothing in return. So you're never worried about how God is acting toward you or how your life is going. Oh God, why did you do that? You know, you can do that as a, you know, as a part of your fun if you want. But the idea is that you love God and you're so intoxicated with God that in your eyes he just can't do any wrong. You know, which is a good place to be because it's true. So it's a healthy perspective, right? So, but this love has to be intense. And how do we make this love intense? We make this love intense a couple of ways. One is by realizing it's already within you, that it's not a matter of generating something. You don't have to generate love for God. Love for God happens naturally as you draw near to God. And we draw near to God by reducing our idea of otherness, right? By meditating on supreme love, meditating on that unconditioned love that God has for us. Because if you can actually imagine unconditioned love, and if you can actually get yourself to accept the idea of unconditioned love, which takes a great deal of courage, because you're talking about the divine, the all-powerful, all-knowing. And when you're actually confronted with that knowledge of unconditioned love has to run deep. And when that knowledge runs deep, you naturally respond with that same unconditioned love that is within you, which is the image of God. And so it's not a conjuring, it's not a generating thing. It doesn't have to be composed. It's your natural state. So it's always a matter of undoing your doubt, undoing your fear, undoing your attachment to things that splinter your love in numerous directions, instead of recognizing God in all the things that you love and unifying your love for the one and only. So that's how we do it, through discernment, right? So there's the ways that you do it is one, recognizing that everything that you desire is only desired because you see a name of God in it. All right. So all the things that are attractive to you are only attractive to you because you see a name of God in there somewhere. And discernment means to look at the things that you're attracted to, hold them in front of you in the company of the divine, and look for his name there. Try and find out, what is the thing that I think I'm going to get from this experience or from this object? What exactly, abstracted out from all the physical, what is it that I'm actually looking for in that? I remember, just as an example, since Thakur gives the example, I tried his thing one time. I was on a walk in San Francisco and saw this very attractive person walking on the other side of the street. And, they hit me pretty hard in my head. And I was like, oof, okay, wait, God, all right, Ma, we're going to try this. And so I sat down on a stone wall right there. And I was like, okay, Ma. I said, I pictured this person in my mind. And I was like, okay, what is it that you want from that person? Is it a body part? I said, because here's an imaginary knife. Go and cut out the body part that you want. Of course, as soon as you say that, there's revulsion. Like, oh my God, no, I'm not looking for a body part. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want? You want the whole body? Well, here's a knife. Go and kill that person. You can have the whole body. And you're like, oh, that's gross. That's even worse in some senses. So you're not looking for anything in their body. And yet that's the thing that you say that you're attracted to. You see the delusion. What you want is the spark of life that's in that person. What you want is a freedom from a fear of otherness in that person, intimacy, sweetness, union, right? Are those not the name of God? Are those not the qualities of the beloved? So don't be a fool and think that you're going for that body or that personality or that smell or that anything. Know that God's name is there somewhere, twinkling and drawing that inner knowledge, that knowledge that you don't know, but it still exists within you, waking that up, which makes you feel that sense of love or that sense of longing. But you're confused because you've attached it to an object and not to that which is behind the object, not to that which is indicated by the symbol, which is that object. And so that discernment will help you to gather up all of your love and send it in one focused being to the right target, right? So that's the practice of discernment. The other is just sitting there and being able to forgive yourself for your own faults by borrowing God's forgiveness, knowing, okay, God's forgiveness is unconditioned. Why, O self, is my own love of myself not unconditioned? Why do I condition myself to have to meet criteria before I love myself, before I care about myself? So we have to do that as well, so that we can let go of fear, so we can transcend that separateness. Because love, we know from the last prayer of Jesus, love is the cord that actually unifies us with God, that binds us into the one without a second. And so by contemplating that unconditioned love, we inspire that same unconditioned love, which is our nature. It comes alive, it wakes up inside. And then we do it by self-control, right? Because falling into our old habits awakens our old ideas about things being separate and being out there and being objects of desire and needing them for our moods, for our happiness, for our hungers, for our all of those things. By withdrawing ourselves from the objects of the world, we again gather that love within and give it that unity, give it that power, by recognizing it for what it is. And so that's bhakti. That's bhakti yoga, and that's how we fall in love fully and completely, with love itself. And so that's the wonderful thing about bhakti, is that the path and the goal are the same. So you don't have to wait until you've realized God to enjoy God. You can enjoy the love of God through faith at this point, right? Faith is believing in unconditioned love without having any evidence in the world of an unconditioned love. That's faith. It's trusting the things we know that we really shouldn't know, because they can't be found in the material world. Now, we've talked about what they are, like pure love, like unconditioned love, like immortality, like infinity. All of these notions of God, that the world, the limited world, could not possibly have told us about, could not possibly have taught us about. And yet we very clearly feel the reality of immortality and infinity and a pure love. And that's faith, allowing yourself to drink of those waters. But some acquire this raga bhakti directly. It is innate in them. They have it from their very childhood. Even at an early age, they weep for God. An instance of such bhakti is to be found in Prahlada. Vaidhi bhakti is like moving a fan to make a breeze. One needs the fan to make the breeze. Similarly, one practices japa, austerity, and fasting in order to acquire love of God. But the fan is set aside when the southern breeze blows of itself. And this is what Thakur was talking about when he says, initially it's a lot of work because we got a big old mess going on in there. And so we have to hoist the sails on the sailboat in order to catch the winds of grace, right? But the winds of grace are always blowing. They're always surrounding us, always available to us. But if we haven't done any internal work to raise the sail of awareness of that love, it's very difficult to get that boat to move. You're going to have to paddle, and it's going to be very difficult. But once you get that sail established, which is what you've got a strong practice of japam, so God's name naturally runs through your mind, is a natural part of your consciousness. Where gratefulness is a natural part of yourself, in recognition of the presence and of the grace that's just full in you and just plentiful around you. And by touching that unconditioned love and actually having understood the reality of it, that sets the sail. And then just naturally you are brought to port, by the winds of grace. And so, yes, in the beginning, it's hard. And that beginning might be, it's different for different people. Like the person you just talked about, they never had that part. They were born with this pure love for God, like Swami Vivekananda, or the Divine Mother, that they were just born that way, born free. And so for the rest of us, there's a period of slogging where we're just like, all right, I have to do my practice now. Oh my God, I'm not allowed to go out with my friends. That's right, because I always get drunk, so I can't do that. We're in that early stage where it's like it's very difficult. The mind's not listening to us. The body is bothering us all the time for attention, and we're running around trying to make all of it happy, with temporary things. And that's the challenge. But after we get the practice going, after we've been steady for a few years, we've done our studies, we don't miss our meditations anymore. The word or the name is going through the mind regularly. Then at that point, we begin to get a taste of this love, and we don't need the fan, the hardworking part anymore. Now things are carrying us forward. When the southern breeze blows of itself, such actions as japa and austerity drop away when one spontaneously feels love and attachment for God. Who indeed will perform the ceremonies enjoined in the scriptures when mad with the love of God? And that's Thakur. You see that in the gospel when he's doing all of those strange things in the shrine, feeding the offering to the cat, putting the flowers on his own head, jumping up into the statue, to be in Mother's arms, jumping up and taking Kali's sword to actually kill himself because he's so desperate to know God. Things like that start happening when you start becoming overcome with this prema bhakti, with this pure love of God. Everybody begins to whisper about you in the background, like, I walked by the shrine the other day and I looked in there and Gita was sitting in Thakur's lap up on the shrine. She climbed right up on that thing and was sitting right there in the marble statue's lap with her arms around Thakur's neck. I don't know what she was doing. This is how it goes. Get ready for it. Devotion to God may be said to be green so long as it doesn't grow into love of God. So devotion to God may be said to be green so long as it doesn't grow into love of God, but it becomes ripe when it has grown into such a love, where it's the thing you would do when you're free to do anything. That's how you know that you're in love, right? We can all think about our high school sweethearts. It's probably, I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but you could sit there and remember your sweetheart. I just remember how intoxicating that love was, in your first loves, which could change by the week at that point in your life. But nonetheless, you felt like this is it forever, and I remember spending hours making these fancy little cards, and thinking up some little poem and not being able to even wait to give it, to your sweetheart, or that first kiss, the boom, 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 boom of the heart, I got so many stories I'd love to tell about those things, but nonetheless, moving along to love of God, just remember those days and measure your relationship with God against that. Have you written God a card lately? Have you bought him a flower lately? Have you put a drawing of yours on the refrigerator for him lately? All these signs of love, open your heart to them, open your life to them. This is not a religion from a box. This is not religion. This is love. And for our relationship with God, our practice is not a rote set of things that we do. It's an opportunity to give a card, to sing a song, to give a poem. When Swami Prabhupada first taught me how to do the puja, the daily puja in the shrine in San Francisco, he says he taught me just kind of a general outline, the mantras and the sequence of the offerings and whatnot. And after he said that, he says now there's two types of puja. He says, there's ritual puja where you have to do everything perfectly in the exact prescribed way, and it's very long and it's very, very involved. He says, but I'm teaching you a devotional puja. He says, where you just keep this outline. He says, and while you're doing this puja, it's up to you to fill in with whatever you're inspired to put in there. Sing God a song, make it up on the spot if you want to write something for him, read him a poem or read him a passage from a book that you enjoy. Or he says, the rest of it you can make your very own. So each puja is your time with God, your time with the beloved. You don't have to obey all of these different injunctions. That's the advantage of bhakti, is that we don't have to worry about these levels of purity. that love covers so much. Look at what your parents put up with you, you know, and that's just barely scratching the surface of the love that God has for you. The forgiveness and the things that she is willing to overlook in you will astound you, and maybe even wake you up to this prema bhakti, to this pure love for God. All right, a couple more minutes. All right, so a man with unripe bhakti cannot assimilate spiritual talk and instruction. He can't understand it. It doesn't go deep. It doesn't answer the doubts. It can't make its way into the heart. But one with the right bhakti, they can. You can tell them something very simple, and they can take it very deep, because they know of the nature of love. They know the nature of God. And so you just give them a little bit of a hint of it, and that echo can go right through them, and they can share wonderful things from that love. The image that falls on a photographic plate covered with black film is retained. That's that old silver nitrate photographs that they're doing. You know. On the other hand, thousands of images may be reflected on a bare piece of glass, but none of them is retained. As the object moves away, the glass becomes the same as it was before. One cannot assimilate spiritual instruction unless one has already developed love of God. Right? And he's pointing at, he says that the love for God of a worldly man is like a drop of water on a hot griddle. One may say, oh, it's so beautiful. You'll see a beautiful sunset and you'll think, oh, God is so great. But as soon as the sunset's gone, God's gone, and you're back off running into the world. That's green. That's the unripe bhakti, unripe love. It doesn't last. It doesn't have a depth. It doesn't have a staying power. But for ripe love of God, it stays. The teachings stay within you. You remember them. You begin to live them and emulate them, not as rote imitations, but as understanding the inspiration of love behind them. And so then allowing the same in yourself. That's ripe love, a love that enjoys practice because it's coming from a heart space. It's not getting something done, getting something out of the way. I learned that, I think I told that story about cleaning the shrine. In San Francisco, I had to clean that shrine, and it was a real Indian shrine with all kinds of little goopy galas everywhere, tons and tons of little details, 1,000 little lotus flowers, and anywhere they could fit a petal, they would put a petal. There was, and I had to get in there with like the corner of the rag to get in between all those little petals of those stupid lotuses in there. And one time I had just had enough. I was like, I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm sick of it, Thakur. This room is so clean. It's the cleanest house in the monastery, or cleanest room in the whole monastery. And I have to clean this thing every day. Forget this. This is nuts. And I sat on the shrine. Swami would have died if he walked in and saw that. I sat there on the shrine, with my hands on my knees, with the rag in my hand. I was looking at Thakur and I was just complaining. And then I got that answer in my own mind, where Thakur just said, he said, look, the only reason you feel that way is because you're always trying to get this stuff finished. He says, you're just doing it to get it done. He says, do it to spend time with me. Spend time with me as you clean this shrine, and everything will change. And I sat there, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. I do all my chores just to get them finished. That's living in the future. That's not living in the moment. And so that was my first lesson. And I took it to heart, and it was a radically different experience. To sit there and not worry about how much I'd done and how much still needed to be done, but rather just sit there and think about the love of God and let my work be a response to that thought. To think about the love, the presence of my beloved, and let every one of my actions be the love letter. The carefulness of it, the concern in it, the wanting to be the very best and to do the very best. It's a life-changing teaching that Thakur is talking about here. And it's a beautiful way of living, a beautiful way of doing the most mundane things in your life in a spiritually exalted way, because everything is Thakur's. It should be how you do your laundry. It should be how you brush your teeth. It should be how you comb your hair, how you fix your hair, not because it's your hair, but because it's Thakur's hair. And this body is his temple, right? In that same spirit. All right, let's do one more thing here. Vijay, is bhakti alone sufficient for the attainment of God, for his vision? So is love enough? Is love of God enough? Master, yes. Yes, love is enough. One can see God through bhakti alone, but it must be ripe bhakti, prema bhakti, and raga bhakti. When one has that bhakti, one loves God even as the mother loves the child, the mother, or the wife, the husband. When one has such love and attachment for God, one doesn't feel the attraction of Maya to wife, children, relatives, and friends. One retains only compassion for them. To such a man, the world appears as a strange land, a place where he has merely to perform his duties. It is like a man having his real home in the country, but coming to Calcutta for the work. He has to rent a house in Calcutta for the sake of his duties. When one develops love of God, one completely gets rid of one's attachment to the world and worldly wisdom. One cannot see God if one has even the slightest trace of worldliness. Matchsticks, if they're damp, they won't strike fire, though you rub them together 1,000 times. You only waste one heap of sticks. The mind soaked in worldliness is such a damp matchstick. Once Sri Radha said to her friends that she saw Krishna everywhere, both within and without. The friends answered, well, why don't we see him at all? Are you delirious? Radha said, friends, paint your eyes with the collyrium of divine love, and then you will see him. All right. Beautiful promise for you and me. All right, so it's 8 o'clock. Wow, that was good stuff. Beautiful things. Any questions or stories or statements or wonders?
Statement. Remembering when you were saying about the puja, I just wanted to yell out, and he does the same way that he was taught by Swami Prabodhananda.
Oh,
Who?
yeah, I enjoy
Swami,
it.
our Swami, this Swami.
Oh, the new
That's
Swami, yeah.
wonderful, wonderful puja. You just have to be there.
Yeah.
I can understand. Which Swami?
This Swami, our Swami is he.
Oh,
Oh, this one. I was like, yes, he does. He does. I thought you were talking. I thought you were talking about the Swami at your center. I was like, oh, I was imagining Ravi Maharaj. Actually, he's such a sweet, sincere person. I can imagine. You know who does a wonderful, marvelous puja is Swami Mahayogananda.
You know, he does. Oh my God, he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I had only seen regular pujas when I first joined, and I just didn't care for them. I didn't like pujas. I used to go for a walk. I was a bad brahmachari. I would disappear out the door, and while the puja was going out, I would just take a walk around Berkeley or something. And and then I saw Swami Mahayogananda do that puja, and I was riveted because I was so used to things just being tossed here and set here and mumbled here, but when he did it, everything was done so mindfully. Everything was just done exactly as it should be done, and there just was an atmosphere around him while he did that, when he did that worship, and I was enthralled. I was like, that's what it is. That's what puja is. That's what it is right there. And it's just that attention, that mindfulness of the presence. It's doing that puja with God together. That's when you can see the difference. That's when you can feel the difference, is when you're doing your worship with the beloved, not just to the beloved. In that sense.
So Swamiji, the other thing is that I'm not saying anything for us, but the very fact that we haven't seen God, we feel it's subtle. We haven't seen physically like Radha did, or it's very difficult to fall in love with someone you've not seen. You feel the presence here and there, and your lighter move, when you're really very much in when deep into your prayers. But otherwise, it's to get into that kind of a relationship, I don't know if it's easy.
Well, there's a couple of ways to run after that one, Gita. The first one that I remind myself of is that you've never seen anything but God. That's the first thing. And so remind yourself of that you've never seen anything but God. And the second thing is that while we're doing our meditations, when we're trained to have the image within us, right? And so in the beginning, that image is barely there. It's like we're lucky if we can see a toe, or if we can hold an eyebrow in our mind long enough to see. That's in the beginning, and it remains a picture. But at some point in your practice, that picture, it will take on a clarity that's more real than real. You'll see more detail than real, and it may last only a split second, as so much of this does. Thakur Ma is a real tease in that regard, but you'll see it, and it will strike you like, oh my God, and you may not ever see it again, but you will never forget it. That clarity was there, that possibility is there, that presence of God is not an imagination. That it's when something clicks, when that time comes, you see that it's much clearer than any reality that you've ever experienced or looked at. That the image of the beloved within is in a sharper and higher level of clarity than what this world looks like to us. And so for now, just hold God in that space, on your interior world, and associate the feelings, of God, the feelings of love with God, and let that be enough, but definitely make your complaint to the Lord. You should you should wake the neighborhood up tonight, go to God and say, look, you and I have been going at this for some 40 years now. Everybody else in the world will show me themselves on my very first outing with them. What is going on here that I've had to run around pining for you for 40 years, suffering through all of this doubt and wonder, doing without you? If you're there, show yourself to me. You owe it to me. You put me in this situation. You've given me my ignorance. You've given me my struggles. You've done all of this stuff. It's up to you to get me out of it. I'm done. Fix it.
You threaten. That's a good one.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thakur totally gives you permission. God is your very own. He's not a magistrate. He's not somebody you have to play games with. He's your very own. She is your very own. You can speak your heart. You can show your anger. You can show your full self, because God knows it already and has determined that she loves you infinitely, regardless. Don't be afraid. If you're speaking with love, if you're speaking with desire for knowing God, say and do anything that you're inspired to. Don't tiptoe around. Go barging into the throne room. You're the heir. You're not some peasant off the street who needs to cower and come in and like, oh, thank you for your grace. And thank you. Oh, no, don't hit me. Don't hit me. This is not who you are. You're the prince, the princess. Walk into that throne room because you own it. You're going to sit on that throne one day. Have that attitude with God, and just go. Just be sincere in it, but let it show.
Good one.
Yeah. Let God live. Don't keep him in a temple or a shrine somewhere. Take him with you, always. Into your deepest vice, you should take the thought of God. That's the only way out. That's the problem with worldliness, is that we don't feel like we can take God, into our vice. And so what do? We become great practitioners of putting God out of our mind while we get involved in our vices. We hide from God so we can get away with another glass of wine or whatever it is. To pick a line, but drag God right in there. That's what Thakur told Girish. He says, take that glass of wine, have that glass of wine, enjoy that glass of wine. But before you drink it, hold it up and thank Mother for the bliss you think you're getting from that glass of wine. And what's he saying? It's not that Mother cares about you thanking him for a glass of wine or not. What's he doing? He's bringing the presence of God into the middle of your vice. Why? Because you won't be able to keep doing it in the presence of God. It'll get harder and harder and harder for you to drink that glass of wine. And eventually one day you're going to set it down and offer it and be done. And so take God with you everywhere, into the deepest, most secret places of your life. Bring the name. And not with a sense of guilt. Sit there and discuss your vice with God. Tell him what you like about it. Tell about him what you're hoping to get out of it. Tell him why you're doing it. And then you'll begin to understand yourself why you're doing it. You'll begin to understand its compulsive nature and why it controls you. And you'll get to see how silly it is and unnecessary. And with a little bit of renunciation, you can set the habit down, but not before you've done that discernment. You can't. That vice has got you. And so you have to bring Mother in there at some point. You can't get out without her. And she will do everything to help you. Don't be afraid. There is no shame before pure love. There's no guilt before pure love. There's only strength and inspiration in pure love. All right?
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank
Don't
you.
forget it.
No, I'm going to write it.
All right, very good. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur,
Jai Ma.
Jai Swami.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Surely.
Bye.